I'm Renee Williams.
And I'm Billy Thomas.
And welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today.
Welcome
to our 100th show.
Renee, yes, 100th show. Thank you all so much for being with us. We are so excited about today. And, it's a special week. Not only is this our 100th show, it's Earth Day week, right?
We couldn't have planned it any better.
I know, it worked out great. We say that Earth Day is every day for a forester, but, we're just really excited to be celebrating Earth Day. And we've got a special guest going to be talking about that today. But first of all, thank you all so much for being with us today. If you're joining us via Zoom, you can use the chat function to interact with us. If you're on Facebook Live, please use the comment section. And if you happen to be watching a recording, we'll also take some emails or other communication from you. So again, thank you all for being with us today. Renee, big lineup.
Big lineup. We have several different guests on today. And so let's go ahead and get started. And Billy, you can tell us exactly who is on tap for today.
Okay, so we've got 4 guests coming up today. We've got Mr. Shane Tedder. Shane happens to be the UK Sustainability or Campus Sustainability Officer. And he'll tell you a little bit more about what that means, but he's going to be talking a little bit about what the history of Earth Day and how it came about. And then he's going to wrap that up with what UK is doing related to Earth Day. So Shane is a great representative of UK, so I'm looking forward to having him on the show here in just a few minutes. Then we also have Dr. Ellen Crocker. Our very own Dr. Ellen Crocker. Ellen's here all the time, but she's going to be talking about scouting for some of the invasives. It's a beautiful time to get out right now, and as you're out there, you may see some things that you hadn't seen before. So Dr. Crocker will be letting you know some things you might want to be keeping an eye out for that maybe shouldn't be in your woods this time at all, really. So, and then following that, we're going to have Mr. Kai Davis. Kai is a graduate student here in our department, and he's working with Dr. John Cox and some of our other faculty members. And he's looking at basically urban tree plantings and the impact on birds and how that kind of relationship. So we're excited to have Kai talking about some of his research with us. And then we're going to have Laurie Thomas. She's going to be talking about how to ID a tree. How do you go about that tree ID process? And so we're excited to have Laurie. She's been doing the Tree of the Week for almost 100 episodes. But we're really going to get into kind of what she's looking for and what you need to look for when you're trying to identify a tree on your own. So we're excited to have Laurie with us on that. And then we've got some special announcements at the end of the show, right? Don't we have some people that won some prizes?
I think there might be a couple.
Yeah. So, hey, thanks to all of you all who entered our drawings for our 100th episode giveaways. And we have got a big list of winners, and we are just so excited to announce we will be following up with all the winners later after the show and letting you know exactly, but we will announce the top prize winners at the end of the show.
Right, don't worry, we're not going to announce all of them.
Right, no, we won't do that to you. And then we're going to kind of wrap it up with a little preview of what we're going to be talking about next week. We've got another exciting event happening next week as well. So Renee, let's just get this show started. I'm so excited to be here on our 100th episode.
Definitely. And Billy, you know what? Thank you for joining me for all these 100 episodes. I appreciate it.
Hey, teamwork makes the dream work. So
exactly.
Speaking of which, let's get Shane on and let's hear a little bit about Earth Day. Welcome.
Welcome, Shane.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And congratulations on this milestone for the show. That's so exciting.
Yeah, we're really excited about it. And we're glad to have you on here celebrating this kind of special week that we're all kind of really happy about, at least in our department for sure.
So tell us a little bit about Earth Day. What started it? How did it get going?
Oh my gosh, what a story. And I'm happy to get into that. I want to just say thanks for the opportunity to be here. This is kind of back to the roots for me. I've got my master's degree from UK's Department of Forestry. Was a wildlife biologist in Dave Mayer's lab, and also worked with John Cox, who Kai's working with. So it's a pleasure to be back among friends, and happy to be here talking about this work. It introduced me as the Campus Sustainability Officer. That's a role that I've had since 2009. And that role is embedded in facilities management at UK, but I work really enterprise wide. So I work with healthcare and athletics, and we can get into more of that later. But I started working in environmental programs at UK as an undergraduate in 2003. Wow. So I've been doing this almost 20 years now. And so since that time, UK's Earth Day programming has been one of the things that that came to that fell under the umbrella of my responsibilities. So I've been involved with it for the last 19 years, and I'm happy to be here to talk about it. Yeah,
and Shane, you really kind of were the first one in kind of a position like this at UK, right? Or one of the first, or were there others? Or
I certainly have benefited from working from a foundation built by others, but in terms of my position title, I'm the first person to fill UK's campus sustainability officer position. But there was some great work happening for years and years before even I arrived at school here.
Oh yeah, I know we all stand on the shoulders of giants, right? You know,
for sure.
The work of others before us.
So Earth Day, Friday, April 22nd, is the 52nd observation of Earth Day. The first one was in 1970. And to understand the origins, probably got to go back almost 3 decades before that to, the post-World War II economic and industrial boom in the United States. And so, as a nation coming out of World War II, our industries were tuned to, almost redlined in terms of industrial production to support the war effort. And, it was the shift to producing consumer goods with that industrial capacity and, becoming a major global exporter of high-end consumer goods happened pretty quickly as well. But, that happened without any regulation. And so that was prior to the EPA, prior to the Clean Water Act, prior to the Clean Air Act. And so by the 1960s, the externalization of those environmental impacts had really started to catch up with us as a nation. And there were probably hundreds of things that people were noticing every day, but there were a handful of things that happened that really caught the nation's attention. There was an oil rig off the coast of Santa Barbara in the mid-60s that failed and really coated the California coastline with petroleum. There was smog in cities to the point that people weren't going outside. And then the Cuyahoga River near Cleveland, which had been used as a dumping ground for a lot of different industrial companies, just spontaneously burst into flames.
Yeah. Not good when rivers are burning, right?
No, not at all. Not at all. And about the same time, World War II also brought with it some advances in chemical engineering and chemistry. One of those was a synthetic pesticide called DDT, which ended up being, kind of a wonder product in a lot of ways for fighting malaria and for, protecting crops. And so it became very widespread in its usage and, helped spur a lot of development, but there were some unintended consequences of it. And those started to catch up. One, pests started to develop resistance to it. And so it started not being as effective for its purposes, but the environmental impacts of it relative to bioaccumulation in fatty tissues and detrimental impacts on reproductive health, suspected detrimental impacts on human reproductive health, suspected as a carcinogen. And really all of that got brought to light by a book by an author named Rachel Carson. And she wrote a book called Silent Spring that really lamented the loss of some of our woodland community members that we weren't hearing anymore in the spring. And she traced that back to DDT along with some human health impacts, and really was the first to raise a large-scale alarm about the connections between environmental pollution, human health, and ecosystem health. So that was in '62. By the early 1970s, Richard Nixon, he delivered this groundbreaking 37-point message to the House and the Senate that covered a lot of environmental topics. And so, as a president, he's Republican. It's not a party we associate today with a lot of environmental protection, although that's a broad brush, and I don't want to go there. But just in general, our two-party system has shifted a little bit. But as a Republican president, he was really the first to raise a national level alarm about this, and he requested that a committee be put together to consider reorganizing the federal organizations that were responsible for pollution controls to better address this. And so that's happening. In the context of that, there's a young senator from Wisconsin, a guy named Gaylord Nelson, who is really pretty upset about what he's seeing in terms of environmental destruction in his own backyard and in the woods that he used to fish and hunt in with his grandpa, and decides to try to do something about it. Now, he gets inspired by the effectiveness of the anti-war organizing that happened in the 60s on college campuses, and so he decides to do a national teach-in. He reached across the aisle to Pete McCloskey, who was a representative from California, and had won his seat as a Republican. So he had a Democrat and a Republican that co-chaired this thing, and then they brought on a guy named Dennis Hayes to be their national organizer. Dennis was a young, effective organizer in several movements, and quickly said this national teach-in language is pretty clunky. And so Dennis helped them coin Earth Day. And after they did that, it really kind of got some national attention and took off. They selected April 22nd because it was a weekday that fell between spring break and finals week. And so it was selected with a college campus in mind. And Dennis got to work organizing, and I think they ended up with 2,000 higher ed institutions and 10,000 primary, middle, and elementary schools that had planned to participate. They estimated that the total participation there in 1970 was, I think, 20 million people across the US participated. At the time, that was 10% of the US population.
Wow.
Walter Cronkite covered the day at the end of the day, and in talking about it, he said it was a success on some fronts and a failure on others, and said that basically the verdict would still be out for a while on whether or not it was effective. He said that the movement was mostly young, mostly white, and Cronkite didn't seem super convinced. But I think in the context of Nixon's message, the organizing that happened, and the decades of degradation that Americans had experienced, the convergence of those three things really led to the watershed moment of the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency and the appointment of its first director in December of 1970. Now, shortly thereafter, we get the Clean Air Act, we get the Clean Water Act, and federal agencies get the teeth that they need to start effectively working with our business and private sector to sustain a natural environment that promotes the health of our people and the long-term health of our industries by protecting the natural resources that they depend on. So, you fast forward 20 years to 1990, and Dennis Hayes, the original organizer, and Gaylord Nelson were brought back in, and they organized a global effort this time. And with that global effort, they really set the stage for the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro that Bill Clinton attended on behalf of the US. And that set the stage for, I think, the global cooperation that we've seen over the last 30 years addressing the largest environmental issues, whether that be ozone or in more recent years, a focus on climate science and climate change mitigation. So you got to go pretty far back. You go back almost 80 years to the end of World War II to find the origins of this thing. But then it's, I think in a lot of ways, it's become very hard baked into an everyday thing. So for me, Earth Day is an interesting day because, as you said at the outset, Billy, it's kind of every day. My colleague at the University of Louisville published an op-ed today in the Career Journal, and he said, if April 22nd is Earth Day, what are the other 364? And he said, why don't we call them unearth days? And they're days that we can use to unearth the simple solutions that we know are there to help us address the multitude of crises that we face that have environmental roots or environmental implications. So Justin Mogg over at the University of Louisville, I'm going to hang on to that Unearth Day thing.
I like it. I like it.
It's got an ominous ring to it at first, right?
Yeah.
Unearth Days. And then you turn that around on this idea of, discovery and curiosity and using science to find solutions. And I liked his spin on that. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what I've got on the 52-year history of this observation.
Well, Shane, that's really interesting. You think you start, everybody is seeing all of these problems, right? But it takes a few people to kind of rally the troops, if you will. But, it reminds me of a couple of things. I think there's power in the individual, but certainly there's more power in the collective. And, and expanding this beyond just the United States to the rest of the world where we all live on Earth, right? Every one of us. That's one thing we have in common. We all live here on this Earth. So it's well-being is important to all of us. So, I think it's a really interesting story, and it's a hopeful story, right? And maybe we could go forward and unearth some of these things that will make the Earth better for all of us. So, you mentioned Louisville, but what's going on at UK when it comes to kind of Earth Day celebrations and that type of stuff? Or what are you all involved with here at the University of Kentucky?
I'm gonna pin that for just a second because I like what you said about we all live here on Earth, and it reminded me that I wanted to talk about my background here. Okay. In addition to some of those kind of really high-profile negative things that were happening in the 1960s, rivers bursting into fire, we also started to see our home planet from space for the first time. And so this photo, Earthrise, taken by one of the astronauts on the Apollo 8 mission, this is about the 10th photo that was taken of Earth from the moon. There were a series of photos, but this one was the one that really folks latched onto. And we started to see that we live on an island. It is an island. It's an island ecosystem in a lot of ways, and that anybody that's ever lived on an island knows that comes with constraints. So this photo I thought was appropriate for today. One, because the Earth is there, but two, this series of photos really contributed to the national and global consciousness that cemented our resolve relative to the creation of the EPA and the land and the watershed laws that came after it. Yeah. So UK, what are we doing? Well, we certainly embrace it as an everyday thing here. Our commitment to environmental stewardship is really broad, and it's integrated in a variety of academic programs. And it's embedded as a core tenet in our sustainability program. And so sustainability is probably most easily understood as a triple bottom line approach. And so we're all familiar with an economic bottom line approach where, you've got a profit and loss, and the bottom line is the difference between the two. Well, sustainability kind of begs that we take a more complex look at returns and losses and include social and environmental returns and losses in our accounting structure. And so we've embedded that here at the University of Kentucky in our sustainability strategic plan, which we're in the process of updating. And we'll have 5 guiding principles to that plan that will hopefully really shape what we do over the next decade. And the first is to make our pursuit of our sustainability goals an integral part of the student experience here at UK. And then those goals are going to be to decarbonize our operations, to become a zero waste campus, and to be an exemplar of environmental excellence across a diverse array of activities, and then to really reinforce and model the university's commitment to justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So those 5 guiding principles, we'll take those this summer and scaffold up to them some strategic goals and targets that are quantified, they'll become the meat of what our next set of targets are. We've already done a lot. There's some tremendous work going on, and it's difficult to cherry pick what to talk about, but since this is from the woods, I'll highlight a couple of the things we're doing relative to trees on campus. We've got more than 12,000 trees on our campus. We've got them all mapped. and in a database. And so we can query them in a lot of different ways. We treat them as a living component of our campus infrastructure. So we know that they're intercepting 15 million gallons of stormwater a year for us. We know that they're avoiding $60,000 in cooling costs by shading buildings. And we know that they are enhancing human health and decreasing the stress of our campus community simply by being present and being beautiful. They also provide clean air to breathe. Sometimes we lose them though, either through storm damage or through a construction footprint. We've got to take a tree down. So a few years ago, we embarked on an effort, really when the Student Center was built, to start to recover that wood in a more meaningful way. And so when we renovated the Student Center in 2017, 2018, we took down a couple oaks and we harvested those with lumber in mind, and we sent them down to quicksand, and we had them milled into coffee tables. And now in the Great Hall of the Student Center, there are probably 20 coffee tables that are live edge oak that came from trees that we have pictures of on the lawn of the old Student Center. And so we started to create this place-based relationship with that wood in a way that was much higher value than just sending it off to be chipped. And so we have elevated our game recently and bought a portable Lucas mill. So anytime we take down a tree on campus, we take it down with lumber in mind. We store that, and then we can mill it on demand for students that maybe need it for a project. So we recently milled a lot of wood for a College of Architecture project to build a pavilion to store the Lucas mill in. And so that's a really neat project. So we hate to lose a tree. When we do, we've taken the steps now through that program to be able to continue to honor that tree and integrate it in the student experience.
Wow, that is really, I was going to say, Renee, I was thinking, we mentioned the quicksand. That's where the Wood Utilization Center is. And, we have our Bobby Ammerman down there and Chad Nyman. I know they were involved with that project as well. So it's neat to see that kind of connection to our department, some of that work. So
definitely.
It's really cool.
Really great work. We greatly appreciate you joining us today. And thank you so much for telling us about Earth Day and some of the things that UK is specializing in. So.
Yeah. Now, Shane, go out and unearth something to make it better, right?
Well, congrats again on 100 episodes, and I'll stay on in case there's questions later.
All right. Thank you, Shane. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, there's invasives out there, and they're booming right now, and they're easy to find.
Fortunately, we have Dr. Ellen Crocker with us. Ellen is our forest health specialist and extension professor here at UK. And Dr. Crocker, it is that time of year when people are getting out and about and they're looking at their woods and looking at their property, but there may be some things they ought to be looking out for.
Or may not want to find.
Well, and it's never a bad time of year to scout for invasive plants, because even if you're doing everything right in your woods, they can pop up, they can show up and kind of throw a wrench in your plants. But different invasives are going to pop up and become more obvious at different times of year. And so right now, we're going to talk a little bit about those invasive plants to be scouting for in spring that will kind of stick out this time of year. And that way you can make a mental note, perhaps even a physical note, flag them literally to manage them a little bit later.
Right. All right. Well, we're looking forward to seeing what you got to show us about them.
Well, I'm here next to the invasive plants that you don't want to find in your woods this spring, but spring's a great time to scout for it, and that's bush honeysuckle or amber honeysuckle. It's an invasive shrub that is one of the first things to leaf out in the spring. So before any of your other native trees have their leaves on, you'll find bush honeysuckle with fully expanded green leaves. So a few things to look for this time of year. First, you can't miss those leaves before other things have them. Second, those leaves are going to be oppositely arranged, and those new shoots will almost have a reddish kind of color to them, but they'll lose that as it matures. And another thing to be on the lookout for is when they're first kind of growing, it might be hard to see, but if you break open one of those stems, it'll be hollow on the inside. So those shoots are going to be hollow on the inside, have opposite leaves, and leaf out before anything else. When it's about this big, that's a good time to find it because you can pull this out by hand, especially if the soil is moist. You can use a tool called a weed wrench or a honeysuckle popper to kind of pop it out of the ground. But once they get a little bit bigger, you're probably going to want to do a cut stump herbicide approach where you're cutting it and then spraying that. You could also use a foliar herbicide for something about this size, but you want to do that a little bit later in the year. Leaf out is not the best time to be using an herbicide just because the plant is less likely to take it up, and what you really want is to kill that root system. If you were just to cut this, it would come back even worse. So you want to kill that root and stop that problem where it is. Well, I'm sitting here next to lesser celandine, which is another invasive plant to be scouting for in your woods this spring. And it's a spring ephemeral, so you'll only find it late winter and early spring, and the rest of the year it goes dormant, but that doesn't stop it from being a problem. It can completely take over areas, carpet the ground. It really likes kind of wet soils, areas next to streams and creeks, but you can see it'll move into uphill areas as well, into those more drier locations, and completely carpet the ground, preventing native plants from growing and thriving there as well. So what to look for with lesser celandine? You're going to see these kind of water spotted dappled leaves. It's really kind of a shiny, glossy leaf with a waxy cuticle. It's a buttercup, so the other name, fig buttercup, is accurate. So it's got those kind of buttercup characteristics, those waxy heart-shaped leaves, beautiful bright yellow flowers that are shiny. Now, like a buttercup though, it's also going to be toxic to humans and wildlife, so not something that things want to eat. And another problem with this plant is that it's really hard to pull up. It has lots of little tubers and little bulbs that mean if you try to pull it up, you're probably going to dislodge those and leave those in the soil to grow more lesser celandine for you. So if you find this in your woods, my recommendation is to manage it as early as possible. Prevent it from becoming a problem rather than trying to deal with it on the back end once it's taken over a whole area. There are some herbicides that are effective against it, and that is best when applied before the flowers are out. So right now is a great time to scout for it, and you could try to manage it now, but definitely put that on your calendar for next spring as well, because it's easy to miss these leaves before it flowers. Scouting for this spring, and that's Callery pear. So it really sticks out this time of year because it's one of the first things to flower. It flowers really early before most other plants even have their leaves, and it has these really attractive white flowers, and that's part of the reason why it's a problem. Callery pear is a species of pear that flowers, but there are many different domesticated cultivars of Callery pear that have been planted in landscapes. Things like Bradford pear were really popular for many years, but since have kind of fallen out of favor for a number of really good reasons, most of which is because they fall apart fast and can cause problems in landscape settings. But the other side of that is that their seeds can be carried by birds and spread all over the place. So if you've driven anywhere in central or northern Kentucky, you have seen it in the side of the roads, in old field sites, and it really sticks out this time of year. Now, this time of year is not necessarily the best time for managing Callery pear because what you really want to do is kill the root system. If you leave it standing, it's going to continue to re-sprout, but it's a great time of year to flag it for management later. And that could include something like a cut stump treatment where you're cutting the tree and applying herbicide to that stump. Another great thing to consider this time of year is maybe upgrading your Bradford pear in the landscape setting. In addition to those calorie pear that have taken over your old fields and roadsides, getting them at the start and getting rid of some of those landscape Bradford pears that you don't really want anymore, they're falling apart, and upgrade to a better native tree species. Well, it's never a bad time of year to scout for winter creeper, this invasive plant right next to me here, because it's evergreen. So it's going to stand out, especially in the winter and early spring before other plants have their leaves. And what you can see it doing right here is one of the problems with it. It likes to grow as a vine up into trees. And one of the first things you can do to manage winter creeper if you see it is going to be to cut those vines, and that not only helps your trees, but it prevents winter creeper from flowering and then producing seeds that birds might eat and spread it long distances. Now, it's a different story once it's grown in its other form as a carpet covering the ground. You can see here around me there's no shortage of winter creeper, and it will carpet everything, reducing the diversity of native plants as well as regeneration that you might want to be seeing in your woods. Instead, you just get a blanket of winter creeper. You can manage it most times of the year by pulling it up if you have a small patch of it, or if it's a more extensive problem, you can use herbicide to control that. There are some other techniques as well, from covering it with tarps to other approaches. And if you're interested in that, make sure to check us out online. You can find more information.
You know, it was so much fun being able to actually be in the woods and film some of those videos.
Yes, and a big thank you to our filming location, the UK Arboretum. As you can see, they have a lot of invasives, but they're also really trying to increase their management and try different things and see what works. And I think that's one of the important kind of takeaways with invasive plants is that on the one hand, there's always going to be invasives. There's always going to be new arrivals that are waiting to kind of cause problems. And we don't just dislike them because, you know, they're ugly or we don't like them. It's because they do things we don't like. They might kind of decrease the diversity of native plants. They might prevent the regeneration that you need to be seeing in your woods if you want to have kind of that long-term sustainability of trees there. But there are also lots of tools in the toolbox to help you with those. And the sooner you can do some of that management, the better.
Yeah, no doubt. And, you know, we'll just remind folks, there's lots of people that can help you too, right? So if you're trying to fight invasives on your property, you know, get to know your local county agent, get to know your local forester, your wildlife biologist, your NRCS field staff. There's lots of people here in Kentucky that want to help you to tackle those invasive plants.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Dr. Crocker. We greatly appreciate you being on our 100th show.
Yeah.
Thank you, and good luck to everyone fighting those invasives out there.
Yeah. Keep up the good fight, Dr. Crocker. Thank you.
Right. Moving on, Kai Davis is next. So
I know, so excited to have Kai.
Yeah.
Hey, Kai.
Hey. Nice
So
to see you.
you're talking about kind of urban tree plantings and maybe avian impact and what's going on with those. We actually had a chance to meet you over in the Arboretum doing some work over there.
Oh yeah, that was pretty fun. That was my control site that I was just setting up to compare some of the reforested areas and things like that. So it was really cool to run into you all so I can talk a little bit about my project then.
Wonderful. All right. Well, we look forward to your presentation.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Let me share
Turn
my
it over to
screen.
you.
All right. So today, well, first of all, thank you all for inviting me and thanks for everyone being here. And today I'm just going to be talking a little bit about my thesis project, that being urban reforestation and its benefit on avian species. So my name is Kai Davis. I'm a second-year master's student here at UK under John Cox. So let's go ahead and get started. So as an intro into my project, I just want to start off by saying that urbanization is an issue. It's a global issue where our cities are expanding and it's starting to encroach into wildlife habitat or potential wildlife habitat. And this can even be due to fragmentation too. outside the cities from roads and all those things. And because of that, in response, we're starting to see wildlife utilizing these urban areas. And this can be in terms of finding food, finding safety, or even finding habitat. So this urban reforestation initiative is being used and can be used to combat this urbanization trend as well, and can potentially benefit wildlife in these many ways. So for my project, our overall question is, how are reforested plots through Reforested Bluegrass Initiative here in Lexington benefiting avian populations and species? So to talk a little bit about Reforested Bluegrass Initiative, this initiative is in and around Lexington and started in 1999 and continues today. The aim of this is to expand Lexington's urban forests and protect local waterways by planting native trees. And we just heard a talk about reducing invasive species and promoting native trees. So this is an initiative that is promoting that and doing that, and it can protect local waterways as well and provide urban forests for all of us to enjoy, including wildlife species. So the wildlife isn't necessarily a big part of the initiative, but it is a secondary benefit that could come from that. And that's kind of what I want to explore. So we are utilizing 13 different plots from 1999 to 2016 through Reforested Bluegrass. So the birds, why we are using the birds. So we're using birds as a proxy species. And this is a question that my mom always asks when birds are brought up in any way, partially and largely because she's afraid of birds because of this movie, to your right. So why are we using birds as a proxy species for this? So for one, variety, availability, and abundance. So there is a variety of different bird species. They're readily available and quite abundant that we can find in this region in many different seasons as well. And part of that can be due to migration. So we can see a lot of migratory birds coming through this region and can be utilizing these plots within the city where there otherwise wouldn't be a plot for them to use. Accessibility as well. So birds can obviously fly, at least the ones that we are trying to find. So they can easily access these urban island forests that we have our recorders in. And then susceptibility as well. So birds can be highly susceptible to different environmental conditions that can paint a story for these plots and how it could potentially impact or benefit these bird species. And then the relative ease of observation for our bird species as well. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide when I'm talking about my fieldwork and analysis process. But essentially, we're just recording bird calls, and then from there, we can tease out what birds are actually there from what we're hearing. So that's relatively easy, but it can be quite convoluted, and I'll talk about that a bit. So from what we found so far, it's primarily just common birds. We're still early in the data analysis. So those 4 birds that were shown at the beginning of the slide, titmouse, cardinal, blue jay, Carolina wren, those are primarily going to take up a lot of what we're finding. However, now that we're getting to migratory season, we might be able to find some white-throated sparrows, which I've been hearing in my fieldwork process, eastern towhee and things like that. And then we have some potentially cool things that we have found, like a broad-winged, broad-tailed hawk, but we're not entirely sure because the process can be pretty difficult. So talking about my fieldwork and analysis, these are where you can see my little mouse. This is going to be our recorder unit, so it's really small. It's smaller than the palm of my hand, really. It's quite small. So with that, they're about 10 to 12 feet high. So we take a ladder out there and we put them up, we screw them in a tree, make sure the tree is okay. We're not trying to do too much damage out there. But with that, every month, once a month, toward the end of the month, I go out and we have an SD card that we have in there. And with that, we take that SD card out that has all of my recorder data and we put a new one in. And then with that, we download the data and it looks like this once we download it and run it through a Kaleidoscope software. So we record 10 minutes in the morning at sunrise and 10 minutes in the evening at sunset. So with this, I'll show this a little bit later as well, but we see this as a sonogram and we can see all the sounds that are being made. So not every sound is what we're looking for, as we've recorded people talking, dogs barking, sirens going off, all the above. So it's a lot to go through, but when we get a clean sound for a bird, it's really exciting. So like I said, we have 13 different sites that we're using through Reforested Bluegrass, but we have 18 different recorders out. So this is a picture of Lexington and all the recorders that I have out. So like I said, we take out a weekend at the end of the month, and I go and hit each of these plots and take out the SD card and swap it out with the new one, and then wait for the next month. And we're trying to do a seasonal outlook and a monthly outlook for each of these plots to tell us what bird species are utilizing these plots. So lastly, as a little fun thing, a little joke, just want to remind everyone that urban ecology is still ecology and fieldwork is still fieldwork. So for this one day, there was a creek that showed up that was a little bit bigger and deeper than I anticipated. So I had to stretch out the ladder all the way so that I can walk across. So it was a fun little adventure trying to navigate that. But most of the time my fieldwork is pretty easy, but sometimes there can be a few obstacles for us to climb or cross. So for the hypothesis of my study, as well as the expectation and conclusions, the overall hypothesis is that the reforestation efforts through Reforested Bluegrass is benefiting avian species through habitat provision and within the city limits of Lexington. So the expectations from the study and from the hypothesis is that there will be a good abundance and variety of bird species. And like I said, this can largely be due to migratory birds that we can find in these plots as well, but also just kind of surveying these plots in terms of what trees are there, how grown it is, and what birds we could potentially find in these plots too. So reforestation is benefiting birds. And I've said benefit a lot, and now I have it in quotations because it's really hard to say that it's benefiting a species. However, we can say that it's impacting species in certain ways and make inferences that it could be benefiting these birds. So these are reforested plots that before weren't forests. So we can say that these birds didn't have this place before, and now they do. So now it's providing habitat, potential food, and safety for predators when it otherwise wouldn't have. So in that way, we can say that it could be potentially benefiting these bird species. And then lastly, we expect that plot age, plot size, and the location of these plots around Lexington and where it is relative to streets and things like that can play a role in what we find there, what species we find there, and the size as well of these reforested plots. And then from this can provide insight for future reforestation efforts if we are trying to tackle the benefit of birds and provide habitat and things like that. So in conclusion, we can use birds of this study to gain insight on the benefit that urban reforestation can provide for wildlife. So as I have ran through my project really quickly, I just want to play a game with you all. So I will challenge you all to use the chat feature as I kind of show you a little bit about my analysis that I do for these birds. So let's see. All right, so you all should now see my Kaleidoscope sonogram software. And this is the same picture that I showed on the fieldwork and analysis slide, but it looks a little bit different. So we can see that there's a lot going on. There's a lot of green, a lot of red going on in this sonogram. So from here, I have to play around a little bit and kind of tease out the noise. So from there, I'm like, okay, this looks pretty good, but there's still a lot that it could be. So right here, I can see that this is going to be the target sound that I'm trying to find. And typically within this range is going to be our songbirds that we're trying to find and listen to. Anything higher in this range are going to be crickets and insects and things like that that I won't necessarily need and are quite annoying. And then down here, we can find some crows and geese and maybe some people talking, some sirens and things like that, which can be important sometimes, but when you hear a lot of people and sirens, it gets kind of annoying trying to find some things down there. So typically this is the sweet spot. So I'm gonna challenge you guys, listen in, see if you can figure out what bird this is, and then put it in the chat and we'll talk a little bit about it. So here we go. All right, and I will play that one more time. Okay, so let's see if we can get some answers coming in.
And Kai, hopefully we've got some birders out there that are ready
Yeah.
to respond to your challenge. Uh-oh.
Yeah, and I will say that I am far from a birder. I am literally learning on the fly, pun intended, kind of. So it's a very backwards way to learn these bird calls. But it's pretty fun trying to figure this out in this way.
You gotta
So yeah, I'm seeing some field sparrow, I'm seeing sparrow, field sparrow. Yes, so field sparrow is the answer to this one. So the mnemonic for this, so kind of how you figure out like this is a field sparrow, is going to be a ping pong ball or a coin dropping on a table, that ting, ting, ting. So that's kind of going to be a field sparrow, and that's what you would expect to find. All right, so congrats on that one. Got one, we got another one coming up. Okay, here we go. All right, so again, we see this one and it's there's a lot going on here. So let's turn it down, tease it out. And then sometimes this kaleidoscope can show what we're looking for too. So we wanna tackle this little space right there. Let me clean it up a little bit more. So right there. All right, so I'll play this one. All right, I'll play it one more time. All right, let's see.
Come on, birders.
Okay,
Oh,
okay,
got a couple.
okay. Yeah, so I'm starting to see how complicated this can be now for everyone. Yeah, because we have 3 different ones.
Oh.
We got 4 different. We have 4 different. So we have an English sparrow, we got wren, we got cardinal, we got robin. So for this one, it is actually a cardinal. So right off the bat, we can see like how complicated this can be, especially for someone that's not a birder. So yeah, so for the cardinal, the mnemonic that we would normally hear is going to be like that swoop down and then a quick like laser, toy laser. For those who are like my age, maybe a little bit older, those little toy laser guns that you would hear, that's going to be kind of the mnemonic. For people of all ages, Star Wars lightsaber can be like what you would hear as well. So that can be a mnemonic for the cardinal. And then I am a Louisville fan, so I'm always go Cards, but I very much love UK as well. So cardinals are one of my favorite birds in these recorders, but primarily because they are always so loud and so apparent when they're calling, so it makes it easy for my analysis. All right, so we got 2 more. Okay, so this one, which I already teased out a bit, and make sure we got this one. So here we go. All right, let's see.
All right, viewers, let him know.
All right, we got Carolina wren. We got peeper, yeah. Robin. All right, so woodchuck. Okay. See, this is fun. I'm glad I'm playing this with you all. So this is actually a cardinal as well. So again, this can be kind of difficult because so many birds have so many different calls, and trying to figure out like, is this or is it something else? And yeah, so there's a lot to go through with this. So another mnemonic for some of the other is going to be like a sweet, 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 sweet for the cardinal, as well as cheer, 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 and purdy, purdy, purdy. So those can all be kind of complicated in trying to figure that out, but this one is a cardinal as well. So the last one that I will show is,
You know, you kind of tricked them there a little bit, Kai, right?
yeah, well, yeah, I want to show
I
them
was
like
thinking the same thing.
yeah, this is kind of what I have to go through when I'm doing this and sitting in my office going through all of this.
It gives us an appreciation for it.
Yeah. But I do use the bird call software to try and help me figure this out. Sorry, so this one is the last one that I'll show you, and I need to turn it up a little bit. All right. Let's see if we get any answers here.
I know I've heard it, but I can't even.
No.
Okay, bobwhite. That's my dad, so I'm surprised he's adding some in. A blue jay. Okay. A towhee. Okay. All right. So I will say that this one is another trick. I apologize, you all. But so this one, you can hear like a few different things in here. So this is going to be one that I'll end up throwing out because I don't really know exactly what it is. And then I think I might hear a spring peeper in there as well, which we don't want for this bird study because it's not a bird. So a lot of times these recordings can be pretty convoluted with like 3 to 5, maybe even more birds calling at once. And it's really hard to say what is what and if there is anything of significance there. So yeah, all of those things that you all said could be valid for sure, but we just don't know. So again, this is another picture into what I have to go through with my analysis. And yes, mockingbird would be a wonderful challenge, as well as thrasher and blue jays mock calls as well. So yeah, this is my project. This is some of the things that I have to go through for this, and it can be really fun, but it can be quite challenging too.
So
Seems like it.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for playing this game. Thanks for listening to my talk, and thanks for inviting me.
Well, we
So yeah.
greatly appreciate you being
Yeah.
on. That was a neat thing to do. I really
yeah.
enjoyed that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Kai, your research, I really appreciate it. I know our department's been heavily involved in reforest and bluegrass. Many students and many of our staff and faculty have participated in that over the years. And it's just, to me, being involved in some of those early projects, it's really neat to see that now, they're being used as research sites for some of this work. So really appreciate the work you and Dr. Cox and the whole team is doing to try to help us understand what's going on out there.
Yeah, thank you. And happy Earth Week.
Yeah. Every day is Earth Day.
Yeah, every day is Earth Day. Every day is Earth Day.
Excellent. Oh, I loved it, Kai.
Moving on to our next topic, one of the things that we get asked about constantly is, how do I identify this?
I know. And with so many tree species in Kentucky, it is a challenge. But fortunately, we have Laurie Thomas with us, who's been doing the Tree of the Week for a long time. Laurie, thank you so much for all your efforts getting us to this point, 100th episode. We've got so many of your trees already, there that people can go check out. But as Renee said, IDing is hard.
Yeah, it is. And it's tricky. And today we're just going to review just a little bit on things you can do when the tree has leaves on it in our review process. But I did want to give a big congrats to Kai. That was a great presentation. And two of my favorite things, birds and now trees. So it's pretty awesome. But yeah, so we've got a tree of the week. This was the very first one I'd done from the first episode, and we're redoing it for the 100th episode, but we're also adding a little bit of the basics of tree identification in with this one. All right.
Hi, and welcome to From the Woods Today, and I'm here with Laurie Thomas, and we're talking about the Tree of the Week.
Yeah, thank you, Renee. I'm glad to be here, and we're actually out talking about the Tree of the Week, which is exciting today. Today we thought we'd actually look at some of the main characteristics of our deciduous trees, particularly the leaves, and what we use for tree identification.
Okay, what's deciduous?
Deciduous, that's a good question, Renee. As you kind of look behind us, you'll notice most of these trees do not have leaves on them. So a deciduous tree is a tree that will have, it grows new leaves in the spring. They're all summer long. In the fall, they change a lovely color, and then they'll drop. And they won't have leaves for the winter, and then they'll have leaves again the following spring. So most of the trees in Kentucky, our forests are dominated by deciduous trees. So we wanted to kind of focus on some of the characteristics that we use in tree identification for our deciduous trees.
So what are we looking at here to determine how you determine even what kind of tree you're looking at?
Sure. So, well, before we jump into that, because there's several different main characteristics we'd want to look at, I wanted to mention a tool that could be really helpful in helping you identify an unknown tree when you're out in the woods or even in an arboretum or someplace. But it is a dichotomous leaf tree leaf key that can help you identify your tree by asking you several questions about some of the characteristics we're going to go over, and it'll eventually get you to your answer, hopefully.
Look like it fit in your pocket too.
It does. It's great. The tree finder is a great little dichotomous key, and like Renee says, it fits in your pocket, so it's perfect.
Definitely.
But so when we're using a dichotomous key, or when we're trying to identify something, there's a few characteristics that we do want to start looking at. And the first one is obviously, does it have leaves or needles? And we know that this tree has leaves since it doesn't have any of our needles. It's not evergreen. And then the next question, or the next characteristic we're going to want to look at is how are those leaves arranged on that twig? So leaf arrangement's really important. And we've got 3 different kinds of leaf arrangement. We have alternately arranged leaves. So those would be leaves that zigzag along the stem of the tree. And then we have oppositely arranged leaves, and those are going to be leaves that grow right across the street basically from each other on the twig.
Hence opposite, that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And for our oppositely arranged leaves, we've only got 4 different groups of trees that are native to Kentucky that have oppositely arranged leaves. Those are our maples, which we have many of those, also our ashes, our dogwoods, and our buckeyes. So if you come up on a tree and it has oppositely arranged leaves, and it's a native tree, more than likely it's a maple, ash, dogwood, or buckeye. And then the third type of leaf arrangement we have is whorled, where those leaves are whorled around that branch. And the main species we have that's native to Kentucky would be the northern catalpa that has whorled arranged leaves.
So it's kind of like going around in a circle around
Exactly.
it,
Yeah, it encircles that stem. So for the tree that we're looking at today, it's quite a beauty actually. The tree we're looking at today has alternately arranged leaves, and you can actually see how they zigzag on that twig. So that's the first thing. We've looked at the leaf arrangement. So we've got alternately arranged leaves.
Okay.
So once we've determined our leaf arrangement, we're going to talk about, we want to determine the leaf form. And the leaf form is, we've got 2 types. We have simple leaf form and we have compound leaf form. And simple leaf form is going to be a single blade that's attached to the petiole. So you'll have just one blade attached to that leaf petiole that's on your branch.
Okay.
And then we have compound leaves. And compound leaves will have multiple leaflets, a collection of leaflets. They can be arranged like a feather, they can be pinnately, or they can be arranged like a palm. And then there's all of these leaflets that are connected to the one leaf branch, or the one leaf petiole.
Are there a number of leaves between each one of those? Like
Yes, so
a maximum and a minimum?
and it depends on species. So we
Okay.
have some trees like our Kentucky coffee tree, it has lots of leaflets. It's got way more than 20 leaflets. Whereas we might have a buckeye, remember one of our oppositely arranged ones, it's only going to have 5 palmately shaped leaflets.
Okay.
So that number varies depending on species. Okay, so in this one, and today we can't actually see our leaves. If we got really close, you can see there is a little leaf emerging.
Right, I see that. Yeah.
Because this is one of the trees that flowers before the leaves emerge. But we do have one little leaf emerging there. There's actually a couple right there. And it's going to be, this is a simple leaf. And actually when this leaf expands, it's going to be heart-shaped. So we are going to have one simple leaf here that is alternately arranged on this tree. So now that we've figured out that we've got an alternately arranged species and it has a simple leaf, the next thing we want to look at is going to be looking at the edge of the leaf, or the leaf margins, because that's going to help us really zero in on what species we have. So we've got several different types of leaf margins, as you can imagine. We have our entire or smooth leaf margin. There won't be any indentations. There aren't going to be any kind of teeth marks or anything along those edges, or serrations as we call those.
Kind of like a knife.
Yeah,
Is that what you're talking about?
right. But in this case, this one's completely smooth. So think about it like a spoon almost, nice and smooth around the edges. So that's entire or smooth. Another type of margin is going to be lobed. And when you think about lobed, think about our oak species. You think about white oak. It's got those indentations.
Right.
Those are the indentations, and the lobes are the protruding parts of that. So an oak leaf, such as a white oak leaf, would be a lobed leaf. And then another type of leaf margin would be serrated. And so if we think about the American beech, it's a great example of a nicely, sharply serrated leaf edge, that nice serrated leaf margin. And then you can also have leaves that are both serrated, have serrated margins, and are lobed, such as our red maple. So a red maple has those jagged edges, looks like little teeth, and then it's got 3 lobes as well.
Yeah.
So you can have a tree that has all of those. Now our species here that we're looking at today for our tree of the week, this one, its leaves are just starting to emerge, but as they unfurl, they are alternately arranged and they are simple, but their leaf margins are going to be smooth and entire. And in fact, the leaf is going to be heart-shaped, which is a great indicator of this species. Not a lot of trees have heart-shaped leaves, and this is the one that most people usually think of. And this is the eastern redbud. Scientific name Cercis canadensis. It does have the lovely heart-shaped leaves and the beautiful spring flowers that do come out before the leaves emerge. It's quite a beauty out here in the woods.
Definitely, definitely. And I know every spring I look forward to seeing the red buds out there.
Absolutely, and it's one of those that we see in the landscape a lot.
So how tall do they get?
Well, the redbud can grow up to 40 feet tall. Usually it's a little smaller, which makes it nice when you plant it in the landscape. You don't have a great big yard, you don't need something really large. This is a really nice addition. It is typically an understory tree in our forest, and because of that it is shade tolerant. Because it's found across Kentucky, it's able to grow in a variety of soils, which makes it nice for using it in home landscape as well. But yeah, eastern redbud it's a lovely tree. It is used by wildlife. As you can imagine, these flowers are used by our bees, and they're an important source for honey production early in that spring season. The trees are browsed, especially when they're young, by deer and other mammals. And then the seeds, so it produces a seed pod because it is in the pea or the bean, the Fabaceae family. It produces a seed pod, and there are a few birds that will eat those seeds as well as mammals. So it does have some wildlife value as well.
So how else besides planting in our landscape can redbud be used?
Well, redbud is actually, the flowers are edible. And so in this time of year, a lot of people will collect those flowers, and you can make redbud jelly out of it. It's quite tasty, and you can find lots of recipes for that. You can also sprinkle these flowers on your salad. You want to add a nice color, something pretty to your salad, you can add the flowers to the salad as well. So it does have some other uses besides planting in our landscape. So I mentioned its scientific name, and it's Cercis canadensis, and so its genus name Cercis is from Greek, and it means shuttle, and it refers to the shape of the seed pod. It looks like a weaving shuttle, which is kind of cool. And canadensis means from North America. So it's a great tree, and I think it's a great one to do in the spring because of these beautiful pink flowers out there.
Yeah, it's something everybody should get outside and enjoy.
Absolutely. And I hope you all get the opportunity to get out in your woodland, neighborhood, or a local park and get to see this really striking redbud.
Well, it was a pleasure being out there with you and doing a tree of the week. It was really fun.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun doing it in person instead of putting together which is much more controlled, doing the PowerPoint than standing out in the Arboretum, but it was a lot of fun and it was a great day. And happy early Earth Day, but yeah, happy Earth Day. And thanks again for all you all have been doing for the show.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Loved it, Lori. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you. So, Billy, we have some winners to announce.
We do. And a big thanks to everyone who entered our drawing. So, if you're just now joining us, we've been over the last couple of weeks doing some drawings to try to get some entries for our prizes. And we have got a ton of prizes that were given out to our viewers that entered our drawing.
We do. And our number one prize was an overnight stay at Robinson Forest. Well, weekend stay, actually.
Yeah.
And we're not giving out last names, but the person's name is Vicki M. She is the one that won the weekend stay at Robinson
Well,
Forest.
congratulations to Vicki. And certainly thank you for entering, and thank all of you all for entering. But there's a few other winners we're going to announce as well.
We have a $60 canoe trip for two on the Elkhorn, and Charles Z won that.
Excellent, excellent. Congratulations, Charles, and thank you for entering. And then we've got a number of you all won one of our vouchers. We do educational programming throughout the year here out of the UK Department of Forestry and Natural Resources. The extension team does, including like our Woodland Owners Short Course that we just now are getting on the books coming up this summer. But several of you all won vouchers for free registration for our programs, and I'll just announce those right now, Renee. Sure. We had Jessica L. Congratulations, Jessica. Chris K. Congratulations, Chris. Edward R. Thank you, Edward, for entering. Sherry M. Thank you, Sherry. Marcia G. And Catherine S. So thank you all, and we'll be notifying you all and getting that information to you all real soon.
Yes, and then we have a treasure box that was donated from Cherry Ridge Wood Products, and it's a beautiful treasure box. And Ruth K was the winner of that.
Well, congratulations, Ruth. That's a beautiful prize for sure. And I guess there's a couple more we wanted to announce real quick, right? We had, thanks to the Kentucky Division of Forestry, they donated a bundle of seedlings, and we had a couple of winners of those bundles, and we had Cody G and Skylar R. So congratulations to all of our winners. We also, Renee, we have like 90 other winners that won some other goodie bags and some prizes, and we
promised 100 and we did.
And we'll be contacting all of the winners. But again, we can't thank you all enough for being part of this journey with us, and we hope you'll continue to be with us on a weekly basis. And please tell your friends. Renee, if you I heard that Netflix lost a lot of subscribers. So if you need something to binge, come and watch. We have hundreds of videos and hours of programming that you can binge watch to learn all about From the Woods Today and Kentucky's woodlands and wildlife resources. So
exactly. And you know what? Right now, after the show, we are going to go out and plant a tree, a white oak. And we're going to show it next week on the show on how to plant a tree. And we are doing this in honor of two things: one, Earth Day, and in honor of our 100th show. So we'll be out in our front lawn here in a little bit planting a tree.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. And please join us next week and tell a friend or tell a family member, let them know that there's a good show that they can learn about our forests and natural resources here in Kentucky.
Yep. Always go to FromTheWoodsToday.com every Wednesday at 11. We will see you next week. Take care. Bye.
From the woods today.